First, I will log into Livingstone and start creating my attributes in the project called Walkthrough Training. Once the workspace opens, we're going to create our first medical attribute. This one will capture codes related to hypothyroidism. To do this, I create a new medical attribute and give it a name and description. Then I can either search for codes directly, for example using a SNOMED CT code, or upload a list if I have one. After selecting the codes, I save the attribute. This gives us a reusable, role-agnostic medical attribute called hypothyroidism, which we'll use later as an observable signal when constructing definitions. Next, we create a drug attribute for thyroid hormone replacement therapy. This works just like the medical attribute, except we're selecting product codes instead of medical codes. I start a new drug attribute, name it something meaningful, and then add the relevant therapies, for example levothyroxine. Again, you can search for products or upload a list of codes in CSV format. As long as the first column contains the product codes once saved, this gives us a reusable drug attribute for thyroid hormone replacement therapy, which can be used in any definition with both the medical and drug attributes created. We can now construct the definition for hypothyroidism. I create a new definition, give it a name, and then add our two attributes. Using a simple or logic block, we combine the hypothyroidism medical attribute and the thyroid hormone replacement therapy drug attribute. I save the definition, and this provides us with a role-agnostic Livingstone definition of hypothyroidism, which can later be assigned to a study role such as exposure or outcome. Next, we repeat the process, but this time for hypertension. I create another medical attribute, name it hypertension, and then add the appropriate diagnostic codes. Once saved, this becomes another reusable attribute that can be referenced when building definitions or cohorts. With the hypertension attribute created, we can now define hypertension. This definition is simpler. It uses only one medical attribute. So I create a new definition, add the hypertension attribute, and set the logic to a single condition. Saving this gives us the hypertension definition, again role agnostic, until used inside a cohort. Next, we move on to creating the incident hypothyroidism cohort. First, I define the study period, in this case 2004 to 2023. Then I specify the entry logic. We want incident cases, so entry is based on the first occurrence of the hypothyroidism definition, with a 12-month wash-in to reduce prevalent cases. This is a single-arm cohort, so we set the exposure as the hypothyroidism definition. The index date becomes the earliest qualifying event meeting the incident criteria. Then we add covariates. System-provided covariates include age, gender, BMI, systolic blood pressure, and diastolic blood pressure. We can also add user-defined covariates, like prior hypertension, based on the hypertension definition, assessed from the start of registration up to 1 day before cohort entry. Once everything is configured, we save the cohort. This gives us the final incident hypothyroidism cohort, ready for baseline analysis or export. On the cohorts page, you will see an example cohort previously created. Each item in Livingstone shows the same set of action buttons. The pencil icon allows editing, the clone icon allows you to duplicate items into other projects, and if you have permissions, you can delete an item. Selecting the Analyze button opens the Cohort Explorer. Once inside Cohort Explorer, the first view is the attrition flow. Expanding the panel shows the sequential filters, starting with all patients in the dataset, applying the accepted for research flag, restricting to patients recorded as male or female, then applying further internal filters. The population is then filtered down to those with the relevant diagnosis, followed by incident logic, the study period, and the 12-month wash-in. Summary metrics such as mean follow-up time and number of practices are displayed above the attrition table. Next, you can add outputs on the right-hand side. Selecting Add Outputs allows exploration of baseline characteristics or distributions. For example, choosing the BMI distribution produces a histogram whose bin width can be adjusted. The cog icon opens advanced options, including grouping by any categorical variable such as gender or prior hypertension. Selecting baseline characteristics generates a demographic and clinical summary table. Using the cog, additional variables such as systolic and diastolic blood pressure can be added. The table automatically recalculates means, medians, and missing values. Further down, lifetime incidence and prevalence plots are available. These display incidence across the general population using a fixed 365-day incident wash-in. These views can also be grouped, for example, by region, and switching to table view provides clearer breakdowns. Additional filtering can be applied using the left-hand sidebar. For example, enabling the Alive at Last Data Build filter restricts the cohort to those alive at the latest data point. Once applied, all outputs update except incidence and prevalence, which remain fixed to the general population model. Attrition, BMI, and baseline characteristics update accordingly. If desired, more filters such as age restrictions can also be applied. When you have a configuration you want to save, select Save Subgroup. Enter a name and description to store the subgroup. Returning to the Cohort Browse page, a new box appears under the Cohort tile listing saved subgroups. Selecting one and re-entering Analyze restores the filters and outputs exactly as saved. Finally, our training material is accessible from within the Livingstone platform in our support suite. If you click on your name, go to Support and then go to Walkthrough One, you will see a step-by-step guide to the things covered today. This training video gives you the key tools to get started, and we're confident that Livingstone will support you as you build deeper knowledge. If you have any questions, our support team is always happy to help.